Hi, everyone. Welcome to my holiday sew along. I am so happy to be here with you all. I am um, hoping and I'm sure that you're going to have a lot of fun with me. I have a lot of ideas to share with you. Um, and I always like to hear comments from you all because I know that this bag has been very popular, as has my first one, the tote. And I've had a lot of input from all of you as to what you've been doing with your bags. So anyway, I know that there are a lot of people that live far away and haven't been able to come in and take my classes. So I'm excited to be able to reach out to you and have you in my happy sew along class. And believe it or not, well, you're going to believe this. I have probably made, I'm probably going on about 100 bags now between my two patterns that I've actually made myself. Um, but it's possible that I have some customers out there that have made even more than I have. So I've had a lot of input from customers coming in and telling me how many bags you've made. So that's always very exciting to me. I like your input. So we have people coming on. Um, so I'm just going to wait 1 second. I have a lot of inspiration to give you, and I have a lot of samples. I have a lot of notions that I want to talk about. So hopefully, if you don't have a project or you haven't purchased a kit to sew along with me, that's fine. You can watch. Um, I should tell you that I've made so many of them that I can actually make a bag now, depending on what embellishment I use, in about 45 minutes. So let me just show you some of the kits. I think I'm pretty well organized here. So for those of you who have not possibly seen our kits, they're on our website. So here is an example. This is the Easy Handbag kit. So it's the reversible kit. Today I'm going to be making this one, which I have not made yet. This one here, I made one last night just because I am addicted to making them. So let me go ahead and show you this here. This is the bag that I made last night. And what I'm doing is that I'm changing things up a little bit. And you can see that what I did with this one, even though it's the Easy Reversible, it's a reversible bag, I got inspiration. I keep my pattern in there. I have so many patterns cut. I have them everywhere. Okay. So you can see that at first glance, it looks like my other tote bag, right? In that I put vinyl along the bottom. But you'll also see that it's reversible. So I am really excited about this one. Now, if you're at home and you have a kit kind of ready to go, obviously you're not going to be able to do this one in the sew along because, let me just turn it inside out. I want to show you something else. So I've turned it inside out, and you can see here that it's the other side of this. And you can also see I left it open on purpose because as you make one of these bags, as I think of these tips, I'm going to give you these tips because I want to give you as much information as I can as I go along, because once you make so many of them, you kind of get really fast at it. And you also, I've learned to cut a few corners here and there, but I've also learned how I can do other things to embellish it. So Gabriella has been asking me to come up with a new kit. And I thought, what about if I combine and I add vinyl so it looks like my first tote bag that I made? Now, one thing, my tip on here is one thing that you have to keep in mind is that if you want to add vinyl to the bottom like I did on this side, don't do it on this side too, because you have to have an opening to be able to turn it inside out. And if I had done the bottom of the bag with vinyl on both sides, you can't stitch vinyl by hand. I hope that makes sense. So always make sure vinyl on the bottom on one side if you want to do something like this, but leave the other side all fabric so that you can turn it and stitch it by hand, and you're not all of a sudden in that position where you go, oh my God, I've got vinyl and I can't stitch it by hand. Okay, I'm going to turn this one back inside out. And the way I always do it is that I push my four corners in and then I turn it. Okay, so back to, and turn it inside out. So by the way, this is also a good way for those of you who have vinyl or have bought some kits from us or are just hoarding vinyl at home. You can use it up on a different bag. And honestly, it gives it a lot of nice structure on the bottom. So, and this one I quilted with Glamour thread using a top stitch size 14 needle and Deco Bob thread. We're trying to get a close up here. So Glamour thread is by Wonderfill, and it's a beautiful metallic thread. I've used it for free motion, and then I also use it for my quilting. And I just want to show you 1 second what we are doing. We now have, they're called Pat's finishing kits. And so what we're putting in these kits is a spool of the Glamour thread, the metallic thread, your top stitch needles, a pack of clips, which are in the back here, and two bobbins with the Deco Bob 80 weight thread, which is very fine thread that works really, really well with your Glamour thread. So we have kits, different colors of Glamour thread for your convenience, because as I talk to customers on the floor, I want to have you have an easy shopping experience. And so that's why our kits are so popular, because I've done the work for you, so to speak, matching the webbing, matching the fabric, matching the vinyl, because sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, right? So we went ahead and made these kits. And while I have this basket here, I also want to show you, and I'm just going to touch on this quickly because I'm going to show you a bit later on again. We're also making kits with webbing, 3 yards of webbing, and we've embellished them with the applaud, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But these are absolutely gorgeous. So we are kitting them. I don't know whether, let me put that down. So we have different colors of webbing, all different colors. And I'll get into that a little bit later on too, because I have a bag with this, with using my webbing. Okay, so let's get back to this. So this is the kit that I'm going to be stitching today. I'm actually going to be sewing, and you can watch. I'm going to be sewing along. I'm going to be sewing on the Juki TL18. That may surprise some of you, but for those of you who have made bags and own a Juki, you probably know why I'm doing this. So this is the TL15. It's a straight stitch only. Very strong machine, climbs up on anything and goes through it like a dream. Okay, so let me go ahead and I'm going to open the kit. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So you're going to open your kit if you have one. I always hate to tear these, but I'm going to tear it. This one is called Elegant Ellen. Gabriella names a lot of our kits, and I love the names she picks. Okay. So I believe this is a rifle paper. So in the kit, you get two sides. Now this is an all fabric, because remember we have kits that are vinyl to vinyl, vinyl to fabric, and fabric to fabric. So what I'm going to be making today is a fabric to fabric bag. So in the kit, you'll find that when you open this up, you have fusible batting in there, single-sided fusible batting for each piece. You'll also find, those of you who have already made one of these, you will know already that there's plenty of fabric and batting in here. And I always say the scraps that you have left over from this, keep them, because you could possibly put them all together for a strip bag or some other project. So it's not waste. These fabrics are beautiful. Use what's left in something else. Just like you, from my other tote kits, you could use the vinyl that's left to incorporate it into something else. In fact, just as a tip here, in the store, I have my first bag hanging that I made using I did a patchwork of vinyls. All my greens and blues, I cut strips, stitched them all together, and it's actually quite beautiful. So anyway, back to this. So the first thing you're going to do is you open up your fleece, and generally I put my my batting, I should say. I put my batting right side up. So when I say right side up, I mean sticky side up. You can feel that it's kind of bumpy. And I'm going to get an iron. Okay. So I've got glue side up. I'm going to lay my fabric on top here. The first thing, and I'm using, by the way, I said I was going to show you different notions as I go along. I actually just went to Quilt Market with Mark. I hadn't been for a couple of years, so it was really cool that I met Alex Anderson there. And she is with Quilter Select, and she was there promoting this product, and I love it. So this is a cutting mat on one side and a pressing mat on the other. It's the wool felt. It's so handy to have right next to you at your sewing station. But you know, no matter how much you have right next to you, you always have to get up and get something else, right? I hope that doesn't happen to me today. I think I've got everything that I need, but you never know. Okay, so the other thing is you're getting a half a yard of 45-inch wide fabric, and you're getting a half a yard of 45-inch the fusible batting in here. So if you only want to cut the amount that you need and not fuse all of it, you can do that. I hope you understand what I mean by that. So sometimes what I'll do is if I know I'm going to have some waste and I don't want batting fused to all of it, I'll I'll cut off exactly how much I need and just fuse that. Okay, so your bag template is in your kit also, and your instructions and your webbing. So you're going to open this up, and you're going to get your paper scissors, and you're going to quick cut this out. Do I have any comments? Peg's on there. Hi, Peg. I got to keep my nose to the grindstone here and not. Okay, so I'm cutting. And throw it on the floor. I'm terrible about throwing stuff on the floor, and then when I'm done, I pick it all up. Okay. So, you know, it's a good idea, and probably some of you have already thought of this or are doing it. I have several patterns, and some of them I make a lot of markings on. I do a lot of my sewing late at night. So if I want to remember something the next day, I may have a pattern where I made my markings or whatever for a particular bag, or I write on the back also. I was going to have this all cut out and ready, but we're starting from scratch here. Okay. Almost finished. You got to have some Scotch tape handy so we can stick this together. And I will say, if you've taken any of my classes, you know that I often say that I learn when I teach, I learn from you guys also. It's amazing to me how much I have learned by teaching classes. And I don't know if my student is watching that did this in my class, but I thought it was very interesting that when she went to tape this together, I was not watching her. I did not have eyes on everybody. Instead of matching up your notches here, she did it like this. And so you'll notice that it's a slightly different, the curve is longer and different. And when she was almost finished with her bag, she came to me and said, "How come my bag looks different to everybody else's?" And I looked at that bag and it was beautiful. And I didn't know. I said, "Well, what? I don't know why yours is different." And she said, "I did everything you told me to do." And I said, "Okay, let's start from scratch. Pull your pattern and let's see." And she had taped it the wrong way. And I will say that her bag worked as well as taping it this way. In fact, she said to me, she tried on another bag from one of the students. She said, "I actually prefer mine." So there you go. So I learned that if you tape it wrong, it works also. Okay, so we've got this taped together. I would love to know how many of you are following me with the sewing. So when I was saying before that you can save fabric and fleece your batting for something else, it would mean that right now I could cut here, which actually, because I don't have a lot of room here. No, you know what? I'm not going to cut it right now, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm looking at this, and I might want to fussy cut it. Do you all know what fussy cutting means? It means that I'm looking at a design that's not all over. So I've got to think, what do I want in here? So I'm just going to put my pattern to one side, and I am going to press this. This is so pretty. It's also directional. I'm using Tula's little Oliso iron that has been so popular. Now, I'm going to share what customers have shared with me. I have my iron, by the way, blazing hot. That's just how I roll. And I also, this is a little steam iron. I also like to steam a little bit. So going back to what my customer shared with me, she said, I don't know why my batting doesn't stick. She said, I'll cut it and then I go to quilt it, and I said to her, you don't have a hot enough iron. And honestly, I like to use a bit of steam. You also shouldn't iron as much as you should press more. So make sure that you've got it really stuck. And I do tend to, I quilt all of my bags. Oh, we have a question, Margaret. Love this reversible mat. Do you have them in stock? We do stock them. Yes. Alex Anderson, you know, I have to say this just because I think we're mostly all women here. She hadn't aged a day. When I looked at her, I thought, oh my God, she looked really good and really excited about her projects. And I love Alex Anderson products. I like her. I love the cutting mat from Quilter Select. I like the rotary cutter. It's heavy. It's expensive. It's worthwhile investing in. Okay. Let me move along here. I'm excited to do this one, but you know, when I'm looking at it, I will tell you this. I let the fabric talk to me. So I'm pressing this, and I'm thinking the whole time, what am I going to do with this? And I love to embellish. I love to use decorative stitching. I love using yarns, couching. I love pushing my machine to the limit. And I feel like it's my job to do that, right? So that when you guys have trouble and you come in and I have to troubleshoot, I kind of have to have the answers as to, well, what's going on here? So the way I look at my bags, and I've said this over and over, is that I don't have a lot of time to do what I love. I don't. You know what? I wish we had 48-hour days, but I don't. And neither do you, by the way. And I hear that when you retire, you have even less time. So I love to do embellishment, free motion. I'm not good at free motion, but I'm getting better at free motion. So the way I look at my bags is this. They're easy to make. They're small square footage, right? So when I go home at night, or maybe you all are babysitting, you have a busy life, you work 40 hours a week, I need my sewing fix. Mark will agree with me when I say to him, Mark, I haven't sewn for 4 days. I have to sit down. I have to make something. I feel like there's a blockage or something. I have to sit down and I have to do what I love to do. And this particular bag, if you look at the size of this template, I think to myself, I can do all kinds of things in this square footage. It's very doable, right? And I've got 4 sides, because I've got 2 sides and then it's reversible. So I can be super creative. I actually thought the other night, because sometimes I get a little bit bored and I think, what else can I do? What else can I do? And I thought maybe I could buy 4 fat quarters and do the 4 sides all different and make it work. So I've painted them, I've rhinestoned them, I haven't brought them all into the store, but yeah, I have a lot of fun with them. Okay, so let me just press a little bit more. I'm talking more than I'm pressing. But I love being with you guys. I know I want to thank you for taking time to be with me because I know we're near Christmas. A lot of you are on watching me, which I love. So I always say press, don't iron, but I feel a little bit of pressure here to get this done. So I was saying before, while I'm pressing, I'm looking at my design. I'm saying, talk to me. You may all be chuckling at home, or maybe you'll be agreeing with me that, yep, I talk to my machine, I talk to my fabric. I'm just going to press a little bit more. So what am I seeing? The first thing I see are dots here. And when I think of dots, I think of rhinestones. I'm not a very glitzy person, but if you are a glitzy person, or even just a touch of rhinestones, maybe you have rhinestones left over from another project, you know, that you can think, oh, you know what, I can use up my stones. Just remember, if you're going to put a few stones on it, you're going to put them on at the end when you're done. Don't put them on before don't get carried away. The other thing that I'm thinking also is I'm going to quilt it. So I'm seeing here, I'm seeing my pattern already. So I have a lot of customers that say to me, I'm not creative. And I get it. You know, that's why we have so many samples. Samples sell product because we want to stimulate you. I mean, sometimes I go out and I'm searching for ideas. So we all have our little times where we're not creative. So when I look at this, it's very obvious to me the way I'm going to quilt it. I have big squares here. So you could just follow the lines, right, when you go to quilt it. But the other thing that you could do is you could be creative, and you could do, instead of a straight line down here, you could do some decorative stitching down here. I know you all have machines that have decorative stitching. So instead of just doing a straight stitch, do what's that little stitch called that's so popular with quilters for putting binding on? Maybe you want to do it, it's like a little snake stitch. Maybe you could do a blanket stitch around each one if you have the time, because it won't take you, believe me, it won't take you that much time to do a small area. So a blanket stitch would look nice around here because it would look like it's a applique on there. So let your mind go wild and play with it. 99% of the time, it comes out pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead while I've got the iron up here. I'm going to take this off and I'm going to press the other side. And the other thing that you need to think about while you're doing this, because this is the time to think, right, is what color thread am I going to use? And what kind of thread am I going to use? And maybe if I'm going to use this thread and do this, what needle do I need? Oops, I've slipped right off the table. Okay, so do my next side. So be planning up ahead. I find the more I make bags that I like my stitching to show. I don't know, you know, you don't have to, but so one of the reasons why I started using a Juki, because I mean, if you have a mid-range machine or an entry-level machine, when I made this pattern, when I created this pattern, I had in mind that I wanted everybody to be able to make this bag. Everybody. Whether you have an entry-level machine or whether you have a high-end machine, whether you have a straight stitch only machine, you can make this bag. So I simplified it to the bone. And then my thought is, you do the embellishment. You add the pocket if you want. You add a tie or magnets if you want to close it. You use your creativity that everybody has. You just have to kind of dig down and find it to add your personal touch to this and make it yours. Does that make sense? So I'm thinking I've got exactly the same. I've got a square design here. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention embroidery. If you have an embroidery machine, embroider. And I can tell you that I would fuse this, the backing on first, the fleece, fuse that on first, throw it in your embroidery machine, and you will be very happy with the result of embroidering on fabric fused to this product. It almost gives it a little dimensional look, and it stabilizes it really well. So if you want to embroider a small design on here, I would throw this in my magnetic hoop. And I can tell you, I don't know if you all remember, but quite a while ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I made a short video that I called Bigger Isn't Always Better. And the video was on magnetic hoops, because the tendency is, if you have an embroidery machine, that you always want the biggest hoop. You're always going to use the biggest hoop. And so when you come in or you purchase a magnetic hoop, you want the biggest. And I always say, you know, a 4x4 or a 5x7 is pretty handy. And I would probably, because I'm never going to use my big hoop to do this, I would use a 4x4 or a 5x7 and just put this in my magnetic hoop, whether it's a brother magnetic hoop or a dime. And that way you just snap it in there with your magnet, embroider something. On this particular thing, this is not screaming embroidery to me, by the way. I'm talking embroidery, but I would not embroider on this. I think that it would be overkill, just because there's so much going on here. But always keep in mind that you can embroider these. In fact, this pattern, we also downsized it for a child's size. And that was by request from customers who wanted to sew with their granddaughters or grandchildren, and they wanted to have a smaller version. And that little version has been popular too. And we have some samples that are embroidered with Christmas, and they are stinking cute. They just are. And you know what? In one of my videos, I also said, you know, these bags are so easy to make that you could use them instead of going out and spending, gosh, how much are Christmas bags now? Like $5 or something, instead of wrapping paper when you buy a Christmas bag. And I think, heck, if you have some fabric at home, make one of these little bags and put your gift inside there. And it just means a lot more, doesn't it, when you make something for someone. And it also gives you the opportunity to be creative and have your stitching therapy, and get it done. Because if you, how should I say this? Once you've done 1 or 2 of these, you kind of get addicted. At least I'm addicted to it, because I love being creative on it. But even if you spend a lot of time embellishing it, this, by the way, is what takes the longest time, I feel. Even if you spend a lot of time embellishing it, you could have one done in 2 hours. If you don't have the time, just whip across with a few lines of straight stitching and you're done. Okay, you're probably all wondering, oh my God, that's a lot of ironing, but I'm giving you a lot of information while I'm at it. Okay, I'm going to whip the iron away and I'm going to take my mat away. I always say we have so many notions on our notions wall. There's so many notions out there, but there are some that are so valuable to have. And I'm going to mention those as I go along. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and cut this. And the first thing that I see is straight lines, right? So I am not going to double up my fabric and cut both of them at the same time, because I want to lay my pattern on the straight line. Now, this is also a design that I could lay my pattern this way or this way, because it has no real direction. So for the sake of the camera, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my pins. Find my pins. Now, if you've watched my instructional video on this, there we go. You can rotary cut this out, or you can use your scissors. What do? I do both. It depends what I have right here. If I have my scissors here, I cut it. If I have my rotary cutter, I use my rotary cutter. If I'm cutting the vinyl, I use my rotary cutter. Most of the time. So now I'm going to start placing my pattern. I want to place the bottom along the line here, right? And now I'm going to look at my sides. And if I was to line up this side with this corner, this is kind of half, reaches half. So I'm just going to, what I'm going to do is look at my center and center this here. And the other thing that I should say, I am not a perfectionist. You guys that know me know that. I like to have fun. I don't want to agonize. When I sew and cut, I don't want agony. So let me just so I'm looking up here and I'm going to line this up. And what I mean by that is when I go to sew the sides together on this, or when I go to quilt it, I'm going to try to get as darn close to matching up my lines here. If they're slightly off, I'm not going to agonize. Now, when I was telling you before that I mark up my patterns, usually this may help you or not. This is my old tatty pattern that I use the most. You see all these markings that I have on there? So when I did my vinyl on the bottom of the bag, I mark whether I had a seam allowance. I make notes on the back. This one says this cutting line includes a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both sides. So that's my ratty tatty one with my notes, and I have more than that, believe me. But anyhow, what you could do if you want is that if you are going to always quilt in straight lines, which a lot of my bags, because they're samples, I quilt them in straight lines. You may want to measure like 1 inch down from here. Here's my Quilters Select. These are lovely rulers because they're so handy, because they really grip on the other side. But what I would do, getting back to this, is I would take my marker. You could just grab a pencil and make some markings here and here, so that when you go to quilt it in straight lines, you can measure and you've got markings on your pattern. That may or may not help you. I do mark it. Okay, let me go ahead and I am using magic pins. I love these pins. These are the long, thin ones. And you can see some of them are bent. I will not lie, they bend. They're so fine. But what I love about them is that they're so long, you can almost baste with them. Can you see how many times I can go in and out? And it doesn't give me any resistance because they have a really sharp point. Okay, enough talking. I'm going to find my scissors. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this because I'm going to cut one at a time. And I'm using my Kai scissors that are like my dream come true scissors. These scissors are so sharp that I can almost use them like a rotary cutter. And yes, we do carry these, and I believe we still carry them behind the front counter. Everything is like butter. Okay, I got to hurry up here. When we decided that we wanted to do a sew along, I was really excited, but I was nervous too because I've never done this before. And I thought, oh my gosh, I love it. Let's do it. So this is my first time. Of course, I've done a lot of videos, but so do we know, I'm just going to ask Gabriella, do we know how many people are sewing?
53.
Oh my goodness.
Well, they're watching.
53. Whoa, thank you guys. Okay. Almost finished one. Now it's going to go quick. That ironing was a little, you know what? For those of you who work or for those of you who are brain dead at night, but just have a few minutes where you think I just need a fix. Sometimes at night, what I do when I get home from work is I'll do a whole bunch of pressing. So if I have 2 or 3 kits or bags that I want to make, I do my ironing. I'm going to do exactly the same thing to this when I go to place it. I do my ironing. I do the drudgery is what I call it. Although I must say I'm a good ironer, and I always I don't mind doing a bit of ironing, but I'll do this at night. And so the next day when I come home or whatever, I've got all this out of the way, and then all I need to do is cut and have fun. Okie doke. So I'm going to go ahead and so, you know, while I think about it, one of the really important things about this bag is that you make sure that both sides are the same. So when we go to sew it together, I usually use a 3/8 inch seam allowance. But if you go, oops, I sewed this side with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, you don't need to unpick it. You can just sew the other side with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Does that make sense? Both sides need to be the same. Everything's going on the floor. Okay, so I'm going to cut this quick. And again, normally I cut it double, but and the other time that you're going to cut them single like this is when you're cutting out when you're fussy cutting a panel. I should show my panel bag right now while I talk about a panel. I think I made 3 of them this year where I fussy cut Santa. I'm just going to grab that one while I'm, okay, there's my other side. So where's my Santa bag? Here it is. So this We're going to pan in on here. Okay. This is cut from a panel. So that was the top of the panel. I fussy cut it, and that's the Christmas tree. So that was one panel. So if you have panels floating around that you never got around to sewing, now is the time. You can still have time to get it done before Christmas. Let me pull my other one up. I hope you're all getting excited thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be able to. Okay, this one I also have to cut. I have to fussy cut. Just lay it out. My pattern. Do you ever lose stuff that's right around you and right there under your eyes? Because I do. Okay, so direction, always make sure. So it's got to go like this. I'm looking at the line. I'm hoping that I get a perfect, no. For the sake of the camera, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut right here so I can turn it. Okay, now I can turn it. But I have enough room to move my pattern. Okay, so I'm going to look here. Here's my center, right? And here. So I'm going to line this up. This is a fairly new pattern that we put together. So maybe some of you didn't get this. I know we sold a lot of kits for this sew along. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this. I'm going through the Scotch tape there. That's why it hesitated. Now, you know, if I'm using my rotary cutter, I normally don't pin anything. So you know what? It's catching my eye here. I feel like I'm slightly off. But sometimes what happens is your fabric is printed slightly off. Has that ever happened to you that you think, hey, why isn't this working out? Anyway, let me put that back in. Okay. I do have my machine all set up and ready to go. I've actually got it set up with Glamour thread. Now, I want to mention something else that I just thought of. In my video, in my instructional video on YouTube, I tell you to quilt, depending on what you're doing, to quilt. You can quilt or embellish before you put your pattern on, and then cut your pattern on after you've done that. That is important to me when I embroider, because you girls who embroider, you know that the stitching kind of pulls it in. So if I was going to embroider it, I would embroider a big square first, press it nicely, and I would press it on top of a wool felt mat because it doesn't crush your embroidery. And then I would lay my pattern on top and fussy cut it. You may feel the same way about doing free motion embroidery. My point is that sometimes if you embellish a lot or you do a lot of stitching, it can pull in your fabric and it can distort it a little bit. Every class I teach almost, I say, remember, fabric stretches. So, and batting, it just does. It's kind of like the nature of the beast, right? And then you think, oh my God, there's something wrong with my machine or whatever. So if necessary, do your embellishment first, then put your pattern on and cut it. Yes, we have a question. Do I have a question? I can't. Oh, there it is. Why not use weights? You can use weights. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. I don't. I haven't. Will there be a replay of this? Yes. This is being recorded and it's going to be on our YouTube channel. So I never use weights. Remember before, I love questions because, you know, I don't always think of everything. I never use weights. I don't know why. I just don't. Everybody has their favorite notions. In fact, when I rotary cut, one of the reasons why I'm cutting with a pair of scissors right now on this video is because at home, when I rotary cut my bags, I have this tendency to turn my mat to keep cutting and not move. I don't know if that makes sense. So here in front of the camera, I don't want to turn my mat, but I've got a smaller mat at home. I have a couple of different sizes. I have my really big mat, and then I have a smaller mat on top of it. I know it sounds like the overkill, but sometimes I have to chuckle at night when I think, you know, if one of my customers saw me right now how I'm doing this, you'd have a good laugh, because I own a fabric store and all this stuff, and here I am doing things my own way. But, you know, okay, so I've got that one cut. Let's cut the last one. And then we are going to sew. Now, so now I've got this. I'm just getting my other piece. So what I will often do now is when I go to cut my second piece, I'll take this and I lay it on top, because I kind of want it, gosh, it just disappears on there. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to look at direction. Always make sure you've got it in the direction you want it to go. And then remember, if you put it down like that, you are not going to stitch it like that. I'm throwing that information out there because I have had it happen with a particular design or something. I think, now why did that happen? I thought it was matched up perfectly. When you go to sew it, it's going to be like that. You're going to have it right sides together. So if you're looking to match something up perfectly on this seam, maybe, you know, the design to come across, then don't put it like that. And it'll make sense when you find yourself in that moment when you think, oh my God, why doesn't it work? It's because of that. So I'm just going to look at this a second and I think, okay, I want to obviously match up this and this so that when I quilt it, I can go that my lines match up. If you are not, by the way, a lot of people say to me, I can't sew a straight line. And I always say practice. But I don't know. That's when you would do a wavy line of stitching. So what I'm going to do right now is what I told you before. I'm actually going to take my pattern and I'm going to mark it where my line is, where the separation of my blocks is, and it's down like 1, 2, 2.5 inches. And then I'm going to measure 2.5 inches here. So, you know, I mess around with this kind of stuff and think, okay, let's see if this works. So this is where my break is, so to speak. I'm just going to double check that. Yeah, that's about right. So now I'm going to lay my pattern down. And I know that I ran this. The center line was in the center here between. So I'm going to place this here down the center. And then this is going in between there. And then this falls in between. Can you see that on the, I'm going to center it here. So I think I am good. Actually, by lining up the bottom of my pattern with the break here, it lines it up well. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this quick and cut it so we can get going. So I was talking about having your machine set up. So for those of you who are sewing along with me, you probably we don't need to get too fancy, but on the other hand, I'm going to keep it basic, but you all are at home and you can do however you want, because you can always sew longer than what I'm doing, what I'm going to do. In other words, you're free to do whatever you want to do. Okay, so let's give it a go with my ruler. Just for the sake of, I'm going to go ahead and just use my rotary cutter. And I don't know why, but I always have like 3 rotary cutters. You guys do that? You always have too much. Watch for pins. You're going to nick your blade. So you can, and you can see that these magic pins aren't like the ball head pins where they kind of make your ruler unstable. I have got a nick in my blade here. Because I've got it pinned, I can turn my project. Sometimes what happens is the more you use your rotary cutter, your pattern gets smaller and smaller. I don't know if that's happened to any of you, but I'm like, huh. But I will say this, I actually made a bag where the vinyl, kind of a long story, but basically the bag came out smaller than it normally does. I have the bag here. I'm going to show it to you. I forgot about that. And it's kind of cute. So it's like, oh my God, I can do no wrong with this bag. That's how I feel now. Okay. And then I actually do cut this like this. I tell you on my instructional video that it's easier if you have a smaller rotary cutter to cut curves. Again, people often wonder, why do I need something small? It's like bigger is always better, but that's not the case. But this works if you don't have every size of rotary cutter. Okay. See how easy it is? Okay, so let's get the pins out. I think I cut all 4 sides. I shall gather up my stuff later. So, you know, talking about pins and needles and all of that, I don't know if you all have noticed, we have this on our wall, and I love this thing. This is when you're done, oh, we have a question. What is that my pad notion? Oh, so when you're done, you know, if you use you're supposed to change your needles every 8 hours, right? Or depending on the project that you've been doing, maybe sooner, after every 8 hours of sewing. When you've only used a needle for an hour, but you want to change it, this my pad has all the markings so that you can just stick your needle in there. So if it's a leather needle size 14, you just put it in there. It's marked. I'll bring it up closer to the camera. Oh, okay, here. So it's got all the markings. Look at how nice that is. And it's kind of like a foam pad. So for people like me who are very messy, I hate to confess that, but I am. I just stick it in there and I know what it is, because sometimes what I do is I put them on a magnet or something and I let them float around and then I have no idea. If that happens to me though, Schmetz has a wonderful app, Schmetz Needles. You can go on there and you can get educated about needles. And actually, it's quite an education that everybody needs. If you sew, you need to understand why needles are important. And talking about needles, I'm just picking up my stuff because I'm going to go over to the sewing machine. Talking about needles, I like a top stitch needle because it has a longer eye. It has a bigger eye, the needle. So when I use a top stitch size 14 or 16 needle, I have less trouble with troublesome threads or heavier threads because it's got an elongated eye and a deeper groove for the thread to ride down in. So if you've never used one, you know, and you've had trouble with certain threads, you might want to look into it. You could also go on Superior Threads or Wonderful Threads online. They both have great education, and Wonderful has very good videos on YouTube for their products. So I'm going to come around, and so I've got my 4 pieces of fabric, my 2 sides. Okay, so what we're going to do, nothing important is happening here right now. I'm just placing my cut pieces right sides together. And I'm just going to bring my notions over. There's a couple of things I need. I'm going to need my clips. Love clips, especially when you're working with vinyl. You know, you can't put a pin through vinyl. The other night, when I was experimenting with vinyl on these bags, I had to unstitch something, and I literally had to throw away the piece of vinyl that I used because it had so many big holes in it that I couldn't use it. But it was okay because I learned a lot doing that. Okay, so I've got, where am I now? Okay, so I've got my pieces. This isn't fused very well, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. I'm going to put my 2 pieces right sides together. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. I got to quilt it. That was a test. So now I've got this. I'm going to start by quilting this one. So I am actually, for time's sake, just going to do some straight lines in between. If you want to do stitch lines across maybe every inch, while I've still got this on my mat, what I'll do is I'll get my long ruler, and with a chalkener, and if you don't know what a chalkener is, where's my chalkener? Here. I use, this is by Clover. It's a fabric marker, and it has a little wheel. Actually, I'll just put it on here because and it drops. Can you see that? See how nice that is? It's refillable. We just filled it with more chalk, but what it does is it has a little wheel, and it drops chalk on there, and as you sew it, it actually comes off. And that's a reason why some people don't like to use it, because if you're doing a very elaborate project and you want your marking to stay on there because it's going to take you a week to do it, do not use this. Use something else. When I'm marking on vinyl, usually I mark on the wrong side. I just use a pencil, by the way. It depends what you're doing. So this is my go-to favorite. My next go-to favorite are friction pens, but you wouldn't be able to see a friction pen on this particular project. Now, if this happens to you, that because I was talking, your batting didn't press perfectly, remember that once I finish quilting this, I take it back to the iron and I press it again. So in my second pressing, it'll press on. So no sweat, no worries. This is just fun. Is there something else I need to talk about here? No. Okay. So I am in front of the Juki straight stitch machine, and I am going to just follow I'm going to follow the pattern. This does not call for a lot of quilting. So I'm going to go ahead, and I've got a top stitch 14 needle in here. I've got, I'm using metallic thread. Whoops. So I'm going to get a little bit closer. You know, when you're sewing on camera, I'm going to do my reverse. You're kind of at an angle. Now, if you can't sew straight or you haven't drawn a line, you could make curvy lines. When I teach this in class, you're all going to forgive me with this bag because I'm not sewing straight because I haven't, I thought I could do it on camera without marking it. Okay, so I've sewn my first one. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get up and I'm going to quickly use my chalkener and mark the line because it's going to be much easier for me to get a straight line. So this is what, when you're doing something live, where did my chalkener go? So Gabriella's following me with the camera. And you know, you're probably asking yourself, do you ever unpick anything? Yes, I do. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to line this up. I'll put it right side up. And I'm just going to get my, you can either use your markings on your mat or on your ruler. So you see, I'm lining this up here, but I'm also going to line up that with that. That's a straight line. I got another question. Would you lengthen the stitch for top stitching? That's something that I play with. It's interesting because it's not something necessarily that I would have talked about. I like to test on my fabric depending on what I'm doing and my thread. So I always have, like here, I've got a piece of fabric, just a scrap. I like to test. So depending on the weight of thread and what I'm doing, I may vary my stitch length. An example of that is if I use spaghetti, Wonderful spaghetti thread that's 12 weight thread, I can actually use that thread on this machine for top stitching with a size top stitch 14 or 16 needle. It works very well. So what happens is that when you stitch, it almost looks like a saddle stitch, but I play with my length of stitching on a sample to see which length looks the best with that weight of thread and that fabric. Because I have often done one line of stitching like I did right here, which actually I'm going to ask Gabriella to unpick that for me quick. So I would test it because, as I was saying, sometimes you can do a row of stitching and I look at it and I think, you know what? It just doesn't look like I expected it to look. And so I do unpick. I often, you know, so you see now, just getting back to this, I'm doing my line. And if I wanted to do it this way, I can do it this way. I'm trying to fall. So yeah, so play with it. The other thing that might happen to you is that when you use a heavier weight thread or you change your needle, when I say it looks, I'm centering my ruler and kind of lining it up with my other line. I got to concentrate here a second. You might find that with a longer stitch length that your bobbin thread might pull up a little bit. Your tension might be affected. So test. Even though I don't have a lot of time, I have learned because I feel like my samples need to look good to test, because I've had regrets when I haven't tested. And I certainly, you know, I'm always saying your machine has adjustments so that you can adjust. It doesn't mean that every time you do a project, you need to adjust your presser foot pressure, your height of your quilting foot, your tension. It doesn't mean that you have to do it every time. But if you are like I am, you like to be creative. I want to have fun. I bought this machine. It has all these features. All I'm doing right now is lining up, by the way, so I get my lines straight. Use the adjustments on your machine. Adjust your tension a little bit if it needs adjusting. Adjust your presser foot pressure. If you're doing something really thick, just remember that when you're done with your project and you've finished with that feature, so to speak, your machine normally does not adjust it back to the kind of the default setting. You need to do that. I often adjust my presser foot pressure because I work with bulky fabric and projects. And if you don't understand how to do that on your machine, if we know how to do it, give us a call. If you have another brand, or look at your manual and understand what your adjustments are for. Okay, so you see how nice that looks? So when I told you in the beginning, you know, I cut corners sometimes. You may see me doing things now or telling you things that are different to how it is on my video, but that's okay, because we all know that as sewers that we change things around. And actually, I will confess at this moment that I don't like reading patterns. I'm not a big pattern reader. I'm just not. I have to read a pattern. Sorry, I have to mark my line back on here. I'm not a big pattern reader. I like to sit down and do my own thing. And that's why I've got these patterns, actually, right? Okay, I'm just lining this up. Gabriella took that line out. That was easy. That's what our unpickers are for. We have another question. The white chalk line looks so good on that black fabric. I think I'd top stitch in white thread. I love it. Yes. If you want it to pop, and I agree with you, it looks really nice. Yep. And if you don't have a straight stitch machine that you can necessarily use a heavier weight thread on, you could use your regular thread and search on your machine, whatever machine you have. I'm going to pull my machine a bit closer here, for see if it has like a triple straight stitch. I hope you all know what I mean by that. It's going to take you 3 times as long to stitch it, because it's like a bean stitch, but it'll really show up and you'll be using one of your stitches on your machine. Okay, I feel better because I corrected that. I have to concentrate a minute now. So you'll notice after you use this chalk for a while, your foot is going to start turning white, and that's because the chalk is literally coming off as you go. Here we go. I can go much faster, but Okay. So now we're sewing. So, you know, if you are concerned about matching up your lines, or I'm talking and going crooked, matching up your stitching lines on your seams, what I recommend that you do, remember it's your project, you can do whatever you want, is sew curvy lines and just start randomly anywhere, just stitching. And so you don't expect the seam lines to match up on the sides. So you can just fool the eye. You'll also, when we come to the point where we're stitching together the sides of the bag, we're going to stitch, we're going to stitch with, I usually do like a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And the reason why I did that is because, you know, most patterns have much wider seam allowances and then you have to trim it down. And I thought to myself, why am I going to start with a wider seam allowance and trim it down? That's more work. So I'm just going to start with a narrower seam allowance and not have to trim it down. I don't know. In my mind, that made sense to me. This is looking nice. Now, sometimes, because remember, part of this, I feel like part of what I want to share with you on this video is not just making this bag, because the bag is easy to make, but as you're stitching or being creative now with your bag, you may all of a sudden think, you know what, it would look very, very nice to add another row of stitching, maybe a parallel line 1/4 of an inch away, maybe a parallel line in a different color might look nice. So as you're stitching, think about that. Is there something else that I could be doing? If it didn't have, I'm stitching squares now, right? If I didn't have such a defined design in the center of each square, I might very well come back and get my ruler and chalkener, not try to wing it like I did before, and come across and slice my design across from point to point. Let me finish this line and I'll. So, you know, I will confess that sometimes, so I could get my ruler and come across, add a line here and add a line there. So think about that. Hopefully those thoughts will pop into your head as you're doing it. Can you see that this thread has a little glimmer to it? This is the thread that we've made the kits out of. You go a little faster here. Gosh, I like coming to work and sewing. I'm going to do this more often. Oops. That's the Juki cutter. If you press the heel, it cuts your thread. And sometimes I scream when it does that, but I love that feature. Once you get used to it, it's one of those features you grow into. And you don't have to use it if you don't want, but I'm a big believer in using what's on your machine. Almost done going down the center. Now, a lot of times, depending again on what I'm doing, I will sew my stitching all in one direction. So I'll always start on this side and sew that way. On this particular one, because I'm coming at it from every direction, I'm just turning it. Okay, so I finished to see how fast that was, and look at, oops, let's cut her in. Look at how nice it looks. Oops, there we go. Just that simple line. But remember, if you get an idea and think, oh my gosh, I'm going to keep going. I'm having so much fun. I'm having so much fun doing this. It's often happened to me. I've still got time. That was easy to do. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to add some more stitching, whatever. So you can keep embellishing. I'm going to grab the other two sides and keep going here. I'm so excited. Now I'm going to do this one. I'm going to start out. I don't need to draw lines here because they're pretty much like maybe 1.5 inches away. So I'm going to just use my lines on here. It's just pretty obvious. So here we go. If you all are sewing along, you may have passed me. Do my next one. Now talking about thread color here, the red shows up. I have to stop 1 second because I thought I heard so. You know how that is. You're moving right along, and then all of a sudden it's like, what happened? Nothing happened, but I have to pull at my bobbin thread. Okay. Okay. You know, every machine has its wonderful little features. Let's lock that in again. And I like the little foot on this machine. It's a very desirable foot that no matter what machine you have, you want a foot like this or a narrower one because you can butt up closer to your zipper or your cording or whatever it is you're doing. But not every foot is available for every machine. Okay, I'm going to focus here and get this done. You know, just looking at this little design, the obvious stitch is a straight stitch, right? But as I'm sewing it, I think to myself, gee, you know what? That little wave stitch would have looked nice, or if I had the time, maybe a little blanket stitch would have looked nice. But of course, it takes longer to do that. But a really good opportunity to use your decorative stitching. I got to keep both eyes on this because all of your bags will look nice and mine won't. But I'll have the excuse that I did a lot of talking. Gosh, I love to sew. Sometimes when you're using tricky thread, you want to make sure you check up here too. Always remember that because sometimes you have problems down by the needle because of the way the thread is pulling off of here. And actually, we started carrying a new product. We just got it in from Wonderfill that I forget what it's called, but next time you come in, It helps. What you do is you put it on your spool holder, and it has a guide to make sure that your thread is coming off well off your cone or off your spool. Because, you know, metallic threads or some threads have a tendency to twist and not function like you want it to function. And what will happen is that the customer will come into us and say, my machine's not working right. Or the other more common excuse, so to speak, and I don't mean that in a bad way, is my machine can't handle metallic thread. And I think that is such a shame, because I believe that your machine will handle metallic thread. You don't know how to handle metallic thread. You're using the wrong needle. You're doing something wrong. So I would say to you, make sure, first of all, we recommend Designs in Embroidery. They make the magnetic hoops. They have a wonderful metallic thread. It's their King Star metallic thread. We run it on all of our machines, and it runs beautifully. So if you feel like, oh, my machine doesn't like metallic thread, I would test it with King Star. Now, I would have the opportunity to go to stitch it all the way down in the opposite direction. I'm not going to do that today. If I was at home, I would do that, just because I'm having fun doing this. And how easy is it? And honestly, I'll tell you that I often set up my iPad over here, and as I'm sewing, I either watch a movie or I watch YouTube videos. Depends what I'm doing, right? If I need to concentrate, I don't. Okay, let me. You know, and sometimes I wonder, I'm using a stitch length just under 3 here. If I need to reverse, you know, this is a little heavier, trickier thread, and I'm locking in every stitch when I start. You may have noticed that I'm doing a reverse. If I went down probably to a 2.5, I probably wouldn't need to do that, but I get a little bit nervous about it coming undone. But it does add a little bit of bulk to my seam allowance. I am a big friend of fray check. I use it a lot, especially when I'm serging. So sometimes, depending again on what stitching, the thread that I've used, I might put fray check on the ends there on the side of this bag. Because, you know, fray check really is just a liquid sealant. So what it's doing is that it's sealing and locking your stitches so it doesn't come undone. I'm almost done. And remember, you only have 3/8 inch seam allowances on this bag. So if you're going to reverse, keep it short. Don't do a 1/2 inch long reverse. Although I can promise you that most of the time it doesn't show anyhow. When I say this is a very forgiving bag, it is. And remember, if you find that once you've finished doing all your stitching, maybe you got a little carried away and kept stitching and stitching. If you feel like you've distorted your bag a little bit or pulled it in, press it well, lay it back on your cutting mat and check. Just check it. You may be able to just trim a little bit off and square it up again. And also, as I'm getting to the bottom, this is the bottom of my bag. Oh, I went crooked. This is the bottom of my bag. Keep in mind that my corners, I'm going to cut off because I want to box my corners. So sometimes, depending on the design and how I feel or how you feel, I could stop here if I wanted and not do the next one because it might be underneath. But in this case, I feel like, yeah, that's going to show that last line. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. Oh, I did skip a line. I skipped a line. You know what I often do though? When I'm done, if I've stitched a lot of lines, I turn my project over and look at the back side, and right away you can see if you skipped a line. But I can tell you that I could probably finish this bag and nobody would notice that I skipped a line. Okay, I'm going back to do the line that I skipped. This print is so busy, it's playing numbers on my eyes. Another reason why it's good that it's not a huge quilt or something. Oh, and you know what? I'm going to come across here too. I missed these two little bits. Cut. Almost done. We're going to put it together. This particular print is saying to me that it's so, I just said it's so busy. The more I look at it, I think, wow, this is really busy. It's really cute, but it's busy. That it would look nice with a piece of vinyl across the bottom to kind of make it less busy. So sometimes when it's talking to me, so to speak, that's when my ideas come about. Okay. Okay, so now I've got this done. I've got this done. So what am I going to do next? I'm finished with the embellishment. So I'm going to take and I'm going to put my right sides together. Now, if you want, this is when you could use clips or you could pin it. You could use a clip if you want. I don't use clips, but what I am going to do at this point, you need to think, do you want to stitch your whole bag together with glamour thread? I don't want to. I'm going to change my thread. And I'm going to change it because I'm going to do top stitching in blue. So I'm going to go ahead and put blue on. And I just need my scissors, my big highs. I'm going to cut. Always remember to pull your thread down. That way. And I have a blue thread here. There it is. And I have a bobbin wound. So this is a bottom loading bobbin. And I'm just going to use regular thread. And then I'm going to test it because I had adjusted my tension a little bit. Okay. This takes me a second. So if you're sewing along, maybe you're changing your thread now. This takes me a minute. Okay, I'm in there, I'm in there. Here's my needle shredder. I'm going to pull my thread up. Let me press your foot up. Okay, I'm just going to test. Where's my test piece of fabric? I think I threw it on the, okay. That looks good. I'm going to put it at a 3 stitch length. I had it a little bit shorter. No, I'm going to bring it down. I'm putting it between 2.5 and 3. Yeah, I have it at 2.5. You can stitch it together at 3 also. It's not going to be a seam that has a lot of stress on it or anything. Okay, I'm going to line up my sides. And I wanted to show you this little tool. It's on our wall and it gets very overlooked. The packaging is here somewhere. But it's called a cut right. Let me see if you can see it. A cut right handy gauge. Trying to get the right view. And what it is, this is 1/4 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch, 5/8, 1 1/4. So it has all these markings. So I leave it by my sewing machine a lot. And I use it, and I usually have a pencil and a marker by my machine also. So a lot of times what I'll do, like last night I was sewing the vinyl on the bottom of that, my new Christmas bag. And I was sitting at my machine. So I'm telling you how my brain works here. I had a strip. Pretend this is vinyl. I had a strip of vinyl and I wanted to sew it onto the bottom of my bag. And I thought, I turned over my vinyl. I don't have a strip of vinyl, but anyway. And I thought, what width, because this is me creating as I go, what width of seam allowance do I want when I stitch this vinyl onto the bottom of my bag? So what you need to realize is I made a 1/2 inch seam allowance when I stitched the vinyl to the bottom of my bag, because when I top stitch, if I stitch 1/2 inch here, and this is where I use this, if I stitch 1/2 inch, when I turn it, I've got a good seam allowance underneath there for me to do top stitching that will hold it down. So I want at least a half an inch. And what I did was that I put, as I was sewing my vinyl onto the bottom, now this is you visualizing, I grabbed my little gauge and then I grabbed my pencil that I always have by me. I have a pencil here somewhere. Oh, where's my pencil gone? Okay, well, I don't need to mark this anyhow, but what I would do, can you see this says 1/2 inch here? So I line it up and I go making a mark, and I come sewing along, and then I go make another mark and make. So I mark as I go just because that's how my mind works. That's why I love this, because it has so many increments of measurements and it's not cumbersome. The other thing that I keep next to my sewing machine is this thing here, my 6 inch Quilter Select, because I sometimes measure. I have it here and I measure as I go. So that, again, that's how my mind works. These are my two little measuring tools that I keep with me, along with mostly a pencil. Once in a while, I'll use my chalkener for that. Okay, so I'm going to do 3/8 of an inch here. I'm going to sew this together. Now okay, so I'm going to give you an example. I have not marked my my box corners here, right? So I just realized that because, again, when I get down here, I take this or I take this and I just line it up and I mark now. Can you grab me a pencil? I had one right here. I think it rolled under something. Thank you. So as I come down, you can mark it before. I'm just telling you, if you forget or you're talking like I am. Found my pencil. You see what I'm doing? That's why I always have. So now I've marked my square, and what I'll do is I'll come up to it, reverse when I get to the line, and cut. I have a question. What is the tool you use to measure seam allowance called? It's called a cut right handy gauge. We have it on the wall. The packaging is so nondescript. As soon as I find the packaging, I'll show it to you. See if it's very inexpensive and it's very handy. And honestly, unless I say or tell people about it, it doesn't sell because people don't understand it. Okay, I'm going to focus again. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this 1.5. Well, you know, when I was thinking about this so long, this is reality now. Reality hits in when you're sewing along and talking. But that's okay. Things are. Okay. So now I'm just going to take, and now I'm going to sew up from this line, and I'm going to reinforce, and I'm about 3/8 of an inch. Okay, and then I'm going to, now stop and think a second. When you're at this stage or before, remember when I was telling you with my other bag, the bag with the vinyl, that's it. We found the packaging. This is the packaging, and it hangs on the wall like that. So when you turn it over, you see the little tool in there. But it's called Cut Right Handy Gauge, accurately measure and mark common seam allowances from 1/4 inch to 1.5. So 10 common measurements for sewing, quilting, and craft. And at the bottom it says, won't get misplaced or lost with yellow-green color. And that's true. We found the ruler, but not the packaging. Okay. So remember that this bag needs to be turned inside out. So I said before, if you're putting vinyl along the bottom of, say, of one side, that's the side that's going to be completely stitched closed. In this case, I've got fabric on both, but it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to leave the opening on the one on the side that's the busiest, because I'm not very good at slip stitching or with closing up that seam, and my stitching might show, and it'll show less on the busy side than on the other side. Does that make sense? So I do stop and think sometimes because I don't want to have to unstitch. Or, oops, And there, I use my cutter. I have my foot control kind of in an awkward place under here because it's a high table, but it's okay. So this is the side I'm stitching closed. I always think I'm a good straight stitcher, but oh my gosh, when somebody's watching, I'm not. Okay, now I'm going to cut. I'm going to cut my corners out. You all know how to do that, right? And you'll notice, because I get asked this a lot, I measured 1.5 inches from the edge of my fabric, on different tutorials, or I mean, if you want to be, I know, okay, I'm going to backtrack a minute. I know that my seam allowances are accurate here. So I know that this is accurate measuring from the edge of my fabric. A lot of people will measure the 1.5 inches from their stitching. And you can do that, but then you might want to make it a little bit smaller. But again, this is a bag that we're kind of creating. So if you wanted a bigger boxed corner, you could make it 2 inches, because what you're doing then, I need my bag, that one. Do you mind just passing that? Let me just, while I'm talking about box corners, we're talking about this. So that's a box corner. If I wanted that to be wider, right, you could do it 2 inch, but it would sit flatter, and you'd see less of the vinyl, so to speak. I don't know if that makes sense, but so you could customize it a little bit to how you want it. Okay. And so when I was telling you that, again, I obviously can't stitch my opening on the vinyl, so I have to do it on the fabric side. Isn't that pretty? So while I've got this in my hand, if any of you are interested in making a bag like this, what I did was I cut off about 6 inches of the bottom of this. I'll talk about it at the end. Let's keep sewing. So I'm going to box my corners. I'm just going to grab this. I have a row of stitching that my tension wasn't right. But I'm not, hold on one second. So I have to confess here that I just discovered, this is like live reality, that something happened to my tension on one row. Darn it. I'm going to keep going. I think when I told you that I heard a little click or something in my bobbin case when I was starting, I should have stopped and checked. I checked too late and I already got a row of stitching. But as I say, that's life. I'm going to keep going. So I box my corners, line up my edge. I'm going to do it about 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to stitch, reverse, cut. And then I'm going to do the same to the other side. So what I do is open this up, flatten. I put one seam going one way, and then the seam on the other side going the other way, and it reduces the bulk. And now I'm just going to sew this. Okay, so I've boxed my corner. If you want to check it, I'm going to turn it inside out. Push my corners out. Okay, so it's coming along. It's pretty. Very pretty. Okay, now I'm going to do the same to this one. And I guess I sewed 2 lines where my bobbin thread was, and I didn't notice. We have a question. Pat, could cork be used in place of the vinyl? Yes, absolutely. In fact, there was a customer in here the other day that had this bag made out of cork, and it was beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mark my 1.5 inch. So as usual, I have a Juki at home, and I have never had the tension go. It's because I'm live, right? That something happened to the tension for 2 lines. But anyway, okay, so I marked my 1.5 inch. I'm going to go ahead and throw this under. And this is the side that I'm going to keep open. I'm going to leave it open about 5 inches. Okay, and we, believe it or not, are almost done with the bag. I mean, we're almost home. I'm going to sew this together. And then I'm going to just go over some of the, another couple of ideas. So for those of you who think, am I almost done? Yes, I'm almost done. But I just want to show you another couple of things. Okay, this is the bottom that we're going to keep open, about 5 inches. So I'm going to sew about that much, reverse cut, take it down there, about 3/8. Okay, I'm going to cut my corners. I'm going to box them. I'm picking it up a notch here. Stitch. I also get asked, do I stitch from the bottom when I do this, when I box, or from the top? And honestly, whichever way works better. But usually I do it with the opening up, with the bottom up, I should say, because there's not necessarily. Okay, so I'm going to flatten it, give it a nice little tug so it's nice and flat. Shoot your seam allowances, one going one way and one the other, and okay, next corner. Make sure it's nice and flat. Okay, and now we need to put the straps on. So I need the webbing. What I'm going to do is I've got this one turned right side out, and this one, the one with the opening on the bottom, right side in, and I'm going to slip one inside the other. I'm going to slip one inside the other. And this is where I use my clips. So I just start out by kind of clipping it together, working around. Put another clip in there. I need to cut my webbing about, you can customize it to what you want. I normally do 24 inches long. You can make it a crossbody if you want in length. Let me focus here. This will be the long sew along. Okay, I've got the webbing 24 inches. Put your clips all the way around. You can always re-clip if it's not. I've got my line here where somehow I've got to think that my thread must have jumped out of my tension. I've got another question. Oh, Eileen. Hi, Eileen. Should a Destiny or a Vesta be able to handle sewing this? Oh, absolutely. When I first came up with a prototype for this bag, I made, I probably made about 5 of them. I need to get my clips here. Before I was happy. And I did it on a Brother mid-range machine. I think I put it together on a Brother PS500. Both of them, whether it was the vinyl or whatever, because I wanted to make sure that the machines could handle it. But one of the reasons, when I get to the top stitching part of the bag, one of the reasons why I keep my seam allowances to 3/8 inch and then do the top stitching about 1/2 inch away from the edge is because I want to stay away from the bulk in case you have an entry level machine or one that can't handle the bulk as well. Okay, so I've got my bag clipped together. It's right sides together, wrong side facing out. I'm going to take my one piece of webbing and I'm just going to remove one of these clips because I've got it. I'm going to put this. I do an initial clipping and then another clipping, if that makes sense. Okay. So I'm going to take my webbing, and you need to make sure that it's not twisted. Just make sure, because I've sewn a couple of them twisted and then I have to fix it. So I'm going to slip it in between inside my bag like this, in between my two. Let's put it over here so you can see it. Okay, and then I'm going to center. I'm going to pick what side I want to center my webbing on. I'm going to center it on my fussy side. I'm going to center it there, and I'm going to put another clip in there. And when I go to sew it, I'm going to adjust it a little bit. I'm going to just take this one off here. I know that it's not twisted. I'm a double checker, so I want to make sure it's not twisted. Okay, so now I'm going to take this one and I'm going to place it in there. And I do place it about 1/4 of an inch past the edge of my fabric because I don't want it to pull out. Okay, so tentatively I've got those there. Now I got to do the other side. So I'm going to turn it this way. I'm going to get my other piece of webbing. I'm just going to take these out a second. What a shame that thread slipped out. Okay, so now I'm going to take this, place it there, put another clip. And then make sure that this isn't twisted. And I'm going to put this here. Get another clip. Okay. So now I'm just going to remove this clip because I want to drop this. Now check that your webbing is not twisted. I can't say that enough. It's not twisted. I'm going to drop it in here. Okay. Drop it down in between the two right sides. Now close it up again. Okay. Okay. So now you want to kind of fit it in. fit it in. Okay, now I'm gonna stitch the bag together. So I'm going to take, give me 1 second here. Let me place that. If you have trouble doing these, some of these webbings are really slippery. I have used my double-sided sticky tape to hold the webbing down. The other thing that you can do is if you're having trouble, because I'm at a funny angle here, you could go like this. I hope you can see what I'm doing. Center your webbing and pull it up just a little bit, 1/4 of an inch, and stitch it right close to the edge if you're having trouble with it slipping. So now it's like basting it. So you see what I've just done? So now when I go to put this on top with my clip, when I come around, it's stitched. But make sure that you stitch it. I'm going to do it to here too. Make sure that you stitch it really close to the edge so it doesn't show when you stitch your bag together. I'm going to stitch this one too. And just make sure it's straight. Okay. And then because I did those two, I'm going to go ahead and do these also. And then when I come around, I know that it's really, really secure. And then the other one. So you can position it, drop your presser foot down on it, make sure that it's centered, make sure you have, just push it up about 1/4 of an inch, and then just stitch. With some fabrics, I don't have the slipping. If you use the cotton webbing, it doesn't slip as much, but I love this shiny webbing. Okay, now I'm going to come around and stitch the top of my bag together, and then I'm going to turn it inside out. So what I do is I always start on my side seam. I line up my seams. I flip one seam one way and the other way, so I have less bulk. And then I start stitching about 1/2 inch before the seam. Reinforce, and then just start coming around. If you have clips in there, you can put your clips, take your clips out as you go. I'm coming around. I've got this nicely lined up. Come around. Turn it. I usually leave, when I turn and go across the webbing, I leave a little bit more, like 1/2 inch. I come across, and as soon as I feel that my needle comes off the webbing, because you'll notice it as you're doing it, I take one more stitch and then I swivel and then I come down. So what I'm doing right now, and you know what's nice about having the opening in the bottom of the bag, is that I can reach in and I can give it a little tug down. When you're doing it, if you're doing it right now, it's quite handy. So if I'm doing fabric to fabric, I try to remember that to put the side with the opening on the outside so I can reach my hand in and give it a little tug if I have to. Okay, so I got to the top. You see my webbing, I'm going to take one more stitch up here. My webbing is nice and secure. I'm going to come across here. I felt it come off, and then I take one more stitch and I turn, and then I'm going to pull my fabric down, my bag down. And I'm going to come. Let's see here. Okay. I need my scissors. You know what? Sometimes I think, oh my God, this bag is messy inside. But as soon as you turn it inside out, you go, oh my gosh, it came out really pretty. Okay. Okay, so I'm coming to the other side. I'm going to turn. So I wonder, I can't help but wonder how many of you are actually sewing. Come across. Make sure that when you're stitching across your webbing, or you're stitching your webbing on, that it's straight. And also know that with webbings, there are different webbings. The cotton ones are very, how's the word? They're non-slippery, obviously. The nylon ones are slippery, and what can happen to them, and it happened to me on one bag when I was first started making these, is that the end of the webbing shredded, and it can pull out. So make sure that according to whatever you're doing, whatever bag you're doing, that if you use a webbing, test the end and see if it unravels, because some of them do ravel a little bit and it can cause an issue later on. Okay, so I'm at the end. Okay. So now I'm done sewing the top. Now what I do is I come back and I cut. I don't cut the webbing down. I cut the corners off because I want to reduce a little bit of my bulk. So what you want to do is go around and just trim. Just, you know, I said before, the reason why I did a 3/8 inch seam allowance is because I don't want to have to do a lot of cutting and trimming. But what I do on the curves is I do little snips. So go around and make some little snips. And if you see a corner that is a little bulky, I just cut the fabric corner off. So I'm just going to hold it down a second and do this. You know, whenever you sew curves, you're supposed to snip in, or you could use a pair of pinking shears. Because when you use a pair of pinking shears, it reduces the bulk by trimming off some of it. Okay. So I'm just doing this quickly because I'm almost finished, but I want it. This takes a second. Okay. I have sometimes turned my bags and then, okay, so I've got it trimmed. I'm putting my hand in here and I'm going to pull it out. I'm pulling right side out. It's very easy to do. Of course, there we go. Usually I give it a pressing too. So now I'm going to push out my boxed corners. Push out. See what I'm pushed out my boxed corners. And then, see, I've got it. What I do is I take my webbing and I just give it a tug. You see how I gave it a tug and it pulls it out? Give it a tug. Turn it over. Give it a tug. Give it a tug. Okay. Now I'm going to take I'll take this one that has the opening and I'm going to push it inside. I'm going to push it in, and then I'm going to top stitch around the edge and I'm done. And then I have to stitch my opening closed that's on the other side. Okay. So there it is. Now I'm going to take it to my machine. And sometimes, depending on how tricky the fabric is, I'll go around now and I'll put clips. I kind of roll it. You may have to pull out the corners a little bit, but I go around putting clips. Let me just do this and then I'll show you. Okay. Excuse me 1 second. So you see how I go around and I put clips all around the edge so that I can hold it. And now I'm going to top stitch. So I'm going to put it back on the machine and do the top stitching. And I top stitch about 1/2 inch away. So roll it so the other side isn't showing. Stay away from the bulk a little bit by top stitching about 1/2 inch away. I'm going to make my stitch length a little bit longer. And as I go, I'm going to take my clips out. I'm doing this fast, so turn. If you have a stiletto or a pair of tweezers at some point, or even a pin, you may need to just pull out the corner a little bit where the webbing is. I'm just going to stitch across. Okay. Okay. It's pretty easy to top stitch, and you see by keeping the top stitching farther away from the edge of your bag, you're avoiding stitching through a lot of bulk that smaller machines may have a hard time handling. Now, normally, I'll be honest with you, I spend a little bit more time rolling it out nicely so that my seam is exactly on the edge, but I want to finish the bag. Okay. So now you want to just give it a tug and flatten it. When I'm done with this, I do want to show you another couple of Christmas bags that we got finished. I'm almost done. As I say, normally I roll these out nice. I also, you can put it, you know what, once you give it another pressing, you put the iron in there. Turn. You see, this is a corner that just needs pulling out a little bit. And then this is my last curve. Almost done. You see how I did that even without putting clips in. Normally I do put clips all the way around. Okay. So the bag's finished, other than the opening. So look at how nice that is. Okay, I'm going to come around the other camera so you can see. I can show you another couple of things. Here's the bag. Let me clear a little bit of space. I need like a big work table in here. Look at how nice that is. And then the other side, see how I stitched nice and far away, and actually it creates like a nice little poof edge, which I like. It really outlines it. And then I'll turn it inside out. And even though my tension, I think my my thread slipped out of the tension disc, but anyway, you can't notice it. So there's my other side. There's my opening on the bottom that I need to slip stitch shut, and my bag is done. I love them. It came out beautiful. Okay, let me go ahead and quickly give you some other ideas. And I want to show you another couple of things because I feel like I've been on a roll. So this is another one of our kits. Lynn actually just made this one up for us. This is rifle paper. And I wanted you to see, she used the Wonderful Glamour thread again. And she outlined, I don't know if you can see it on camera. Maybe we can get a close-up. She outlined the actual squares on the design. I'm going to hold it up. Look at how beautiful. And then the inside is like a rickrack, and she went in the opposite direction with the stitching. So that's beautiful. Now, let me show you. I'm just going to grab another couple of. This is another bag where I put vinyl on the bottom. This one came out cute. Little frogs. But you see how the vinyl, I made it narrower than my Christmas one. And then here's this one we don't have a kit for, but we have the fabric. And when I talk to you, if you can't do straight lines, do a lot of wavy lines. So this is all just wavy lines. And on the inside, I just used a red fabric and did gold and green. It's very effective. Just a lot of fun when you don't want to think. And now we get to something that has me really, really excited. I feel like even though it's the last, it's not least. So this is my new bag. I used our new Australian fabrics, and I used the Baby Lock Applaud for the decorative stitching. So the stitching that you see on the webbing, remember in the beginning I showed you we have it packaged. I did the decorative cover stitch on my Applaud machine, and I'm going to show you 2 seconds how it works. So very, very, very beautiful. And then I did my reversible bag with the Applaud. It's I had a lot of fun, easy to do. And for this, I used the design that was printed on the bag as my, it's kind of like a kaleidoscope. And then decorative Applaud stitching. And I'm going to show you in 1 second how I have my machine set up. For those of you who have purchased an Applaud, I like to show off machinery that's available because it's quite mind-blowing sometimes if you don't know what's available, what machines can do nowadays. So this is the new Baby Lock decorative cover stitch Applaud. I've got an insert in here that in the foot that allows me to put yarn through. So I've got 2 rows of yarn here. I've got decorative stitching on my, let me just put this under before I finish. so it's got a patented new foot that only fits this machine, does not fit any other baby lock serger. And what it does is that it's got wipers that swipe across and drop the decorative stitching down on top, and the two threads to the left, my decorative threads, are being dropped on top of the yarn that's being fed through underneath. And meanwhile, my 3 needles and my chain looper are stitching everything down and creating the stitch. I love this. You'll gather from this video that I love embellishing and surfaces and doing decorative stuff, and this machine is a winner. So the insert will actually guide it. I'm just untwisting the yarn as it goes in. So kind of like a multi-function. I'm just going to stitch off. And it's also a cover stitch machine. For those of you who sew Lycra, maybe you only have a serger. And look at what I'm going to keep stitching. And look at that, how beautiful. So I'm using variegated yarn, decorative thread on top. And then my needles, my 3 needles are stitching everything down. So I love it. So that's how I did the decorative stitching on here. So I think that we have come to an end of my sew along. I'm going to come around back over here. I want to thank you for watching and sticking with me on this live production that my first sew along that I've done. Hopefully, I'm going to do a lot more. That's what I'm wanting and planning to do. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you all. We had a lot of customers. We have a lot of customers on watching us. So remember to check out our website. We still have some kits, some Christmas kits left. We're constantly making new kits and trying to come up with really creative ideas, like our decorated webbing, and trying to make things easier for you and more pleasurable for your sewing and serging. So check out our website, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.